Hi again, everybody. Welcome into an all-new episode of When the Game Ends. This is our 12th edition of this podcast. Ben Holden, my co-host, bottom of the screen, Mike Carmen. Carmi, great to see you as always. And Stacey Goodrich is joining us today. Stacey is a mental strength coach, has a master's degree in her field and does a tremendous job. And Stacey, this is a bit of a different podcast for us because normally we are talking about athletes transitioning out. I think we're going to do a little bit of both. You specifically work with athletes in the game. Number one, thanks for joining us, and we're looking forward to getting into the conversation. So let's kind of start with how we got in touch with you. And I know Mike's already rolling his eyes at me here. It has to do with North Dakota. He's a former Gopher, of course, but I'm kidding, of course. Tim
I
Hennessy,
have
their
no
long
comments.
yeah, I'll cover that. Tim Hennessy, their longtime radio guy, I was on his show a couple months ago, and he saw what we're doing, and he said, "Benny, you got to get Stacey on. You got to get Stacey on." So, what's the tie to North Dakota? Let's start there, and what's the tie maybe to their athletic program, Stacey?
Well, I met Dr. Phil Johnson. He's an orthopedic surgeon that I think he's a regular person on Tim's show. And so I got the honor to be on his show. They asked me to be a guest, and I think I did maybe three times on his show, just little bits and pieces, and they were great because they had great questions, and they would learn some things, and then they would build on that, and it was really fun. So that's how I got connected to them.
Good stuff. And let's kind of start with how you got into this. Your company is called So Connected. You went online with that in 2017, and really this all kind of is tied into your daughter, Liv, who was a gymnast. She was an NCAA gymnast. Walk us through the process of getting involved in what you do now with your company and with your business and working with athletes on the mental coaching side of things.
Well, and thanks for having me, you guys.
Of course.
When I was getting my master's in therapeutic coaching, and it's a master's in neurolinguistic programming, which is all about how the brain is how we file things. And basically, when something happens to us, we perceive it a certain way, it gets grooved into our brain, and we behave according to that mentality or that perception. And so I was working, getting my master's, and my daughter came home and said, "Mom, Sarah asked me to do a back walk over on the high beam, and I couldn't do it." And like every other mother and coach in the world, I said, "That's okay. Don't worry about it. You'll figure it out." And she was like, "That's not going to work." And what I realized is that, most people are telling our kids and athletes to get out of their head. Don't think about it. Just do it. And when that doesn't work, there's a problem. And what I realize is when that happens, what happens is our mind and our body get disconnected. And once there's a disconnect, all kinds of things get between the mind and the body. And those are the symptoms. That's what people see, lacking confidence, negative self-talk, inability to do physically what they know they can do. And I realized that I flip everything upside down, and I'm working with what's going on unconsciously or mentally. And with that awareness and with the ability to manage that, then people can control their thoughts, connect their mind to their body, practice what they do best, and perform in their potential. And so I started working with my daughter. She was 9. She's 23 now, just graduated from Utah State. And I've been basically working with athletes 30 plus a week, one-on-one, all over the world now with all different sports.
So, would you say that your passion for essentially what you're doing now it came from your daughter's the one that kind of gave you the lines to want to follow this? Did you have something earlier in life that had been like, hey, this is something I want to get into or I'm excited about? I'm just curious where you kind of went down the road of sports psychology.
Well, I was a newly divorced mother of 4 kids when I was about 35, and
Hmm.
I needed something flexible, and so I became a personal trainer. And when I was training with people, I realized that they were holding on to the weight for a good reason. It wasn't like people were not trying. We all know what to do to lose weight. And why aren't they doing it? Well, I just knew that there was something going on unconsciously to connect to that weight. It was serving them in a comfort, security, safety. And so I went back and got my master's to get to learn more about that and build a little bit of a backbone on the understanding of what is actually going on with people. So you're right.
Yeah.
I started
Yeah.
out.
Okay. No, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you there. There's a little bit of a lag sometimes. But I guess what you're kind of everything you're centering this around is, or at least I caught on with the first answer you gave, was the pressures. And the older you get in a sport and, the higher level you play or participate in, that pressure you're going to feel, whether you're being told to relax and just play. But the reality of it is, that your job is on the line when it becomes a job for you, when it is professional, even in college, like, your job or your role is on the line every single time. And you can't help but think in the back of your head that, hey, if I screw up, like, it's not fine. I don't get a second chance. Despite what the coach is telling you, that, you have to perform when asked to. And so I thought that was interesting. You related that to your daughter being like, I didn't catch what the move was she couldn't do, but yeah, just something that, that really plays a factor.
Well, you're right. And my daughter was 9 and I needed strategies and tools to be able to help her understand how to manage what she needed to do to maximize her opportunity. And I really had no idea. I was, working. I was like, okay, I gotta, Twin City Twisters is one of the best gyms in the country. They hired me and they were like, if you're not good, if you're not helping, we don't need you. So I had to really figure it out very quickly. And gymnasts are very mentally challenged, very young. And so for me, it just was something I needed to do because I was my daughter's mom and I didn't see anything else that was helping her on the mental side. And so I kind of got into it by accident. But what I'm realizing is, like, when you watch the Vikings, it's annoying because I'm like, oh my God, you could clearly see what I call is in their A circle. Are you okay if I teach you A circle quick?
Yes, I want to
Go for it.
get to that. So I know there's an A, B, and a C. So you feel free to start the education here for us. Carmi might understand this a little bit better than me, having been a pro athlete and a college athlete. But yes, feel free, Stacey.
Well, my business is set up, you have to, it's in shifts. So we have to have a shift in understanding, we have to have a shift in perception, shift in success, shift in potential, and a shift in belief. And so for me, I needed to teach people how to separate their thoughts from themselves so they could understand them and work with what was going on in their head. And so A circle is a strategy I created to help people understand how to do that. And so everybody has what I call an A circle, a B circle, and a C circle. And there's no right or wrong way with how it's set up. It's a way for us to understand what's controlling us or what's making decisions for us in any particular moment. And so when you guys think about it for yourself first, whoever or whatever is in your A circle is who or what's making decisions for you, or who or what is running the show for you in that situation. B circle are people or things that support you to make a decision, or they can influence your decisions, but they're not making it for you. And C circle is everything else irrelevant or everything else outside of that. And so when you think of who or what is in your A circle, or when you were playing, when I work with an athlete, more than likely they have their coaches in their A circle. They might have their teammates in there. They might, they have people. They can also have thoughts. I don't want to mess it up. What if I lose my job? What if I can't do what I need to do? We can have thoughts in our A circle controlling us, and also energy, anxiety, and fear, and worry and pressure, and all of those things and how they affect people. So when people are aware that they have an A circle, what happens then with my daughter, now she's on the beam. Well, she didn't want to upset her coach. She didn't want to, not do it. She didn't want to balk. And so by teaching her A circle, then I could say, well, do you see how that's in your A circle? Yes. Do you see how that's controlling you? Yes. Are you okay with that? No. What do you want to have in your A circle when you're on the beam? And then giving them a new place to land. I need to focus on staying tall, grabbing the beam, watching my foot land, squaring my hips, whatever they say, to give their mind a job to focus on what to do. That also separates all the things that they don't want to have happen, or what in the past, those negative thoughts that would have been controlling them.
Interesting. I
Wow,
mean,
that's a lot
this
to take
makes
in.
yeah, it is, and this makes me think of something. Carmi and I were actually kind of talking about it. Something that my son said to me about this podcast, and what you're saying. What my son said to me about this podcast was, he said, "I like the idea and I like the concept. It's obviously about sports, and he's a sports guy, being my son, being in television for 30 years. But he said it's relatable to anybody." And what I'm hearing from you in the circle, Stacey, is this stuff's relatable. You don't have to be an athlete. You don't have to be a coach. You don't have to be a current athlete, a former athlete. Can you expand on that a little bit? Just the mentality of all that.
Well, you're exactly right, because A circle, the benefit, people will say, get that out of your head, or don't think about it, just do it. Or, anytime we have a coach telling someone what to do, if they don't have the ability to flip that around and go from the inside out to decide how they want to move toward that, then you're just trying or coping, or you're just, trying to do what you think they want you to do.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a disempowering way of going about for athletes, in my opinion. But once you teach them A circle, then if you have like if my daughter's coach says, Livy, that was a terrible bar routine. Well, without knowing A circle, she could perceive it as, I'm terrible at bars and I'm never going to be good. And then you groove that into your brain and you behave according to that mentality. But if she knows A circle, she can go, yeah, I can consider what she's saying, but what do I really want to do? I just want to work on my bars. Now I have choice. I have the ability to kick it out. I have the ability to be able to focus on what I want to do versus, something else controlling me that's happening unconsciously to athletes primarily.
Would you describe that kind of, I guess it's a different way of maybe saying, like, playing not to make a mistake, right? You talk about playing just to appease a coach and what they say, but I equivocate that in my mind with our sport. It's like playing like scared to make a mistake, right? Is that kind of what you're saying? That's kind of how I'm seeing it.
Exactly. I was at the Gopher hockey game maybe a month ago, and they were in overtime against Fairbanks, I think, Alaska.
Mm-hmm.
And in the overtime, they were shooting, and I'm like, they're so annoying because they're playing to not lose instead of playing to win. Fairbanks played to win. They were kind of going back and forth, and I'm not the X's and O's of, that's not my specialty. But yes, when we're trying to do our job, sometimes that can look like we're playing to not lose, or we're a little bit hesitant. We're kind of on our heels a little bit because we don't know personally what I need to do my best within this situation. I'm just trying to do what my coach is asking of me. Because then I know I'm not going to lose my spot, lose my job, whatever that is. But we want to merge it. We want to have both. We want the athlete to be able to maximize the ability to understand what the coaches are asking of them. But then in the moment, do what they think is the best, because when their mind and body are connected and they're congruent and they are aligned, well, nobody's going to argue with that. But when they
So
don't,
do you, yeah, I was going to say, on the flip side of that, do you work with coaches at all to teach them about how they should be coaching, or how, their messages are being perceived and delivery and all that?
yes, because coaches, a lot of times I get a little bit of a, they don't want to add something else that they have to do into their program. And so a lot of times with coaches, I get a little bit of a, well, we have people for that, or we have, we have psychologists and things like that, but they don't because I can see where they have gaps within their mentality of what their guys are doing.
Hmm.
But yes, I work with coaches all the time, especially with my gymnasts, because coaches are constantly struggling with mental blocks. Mental blocks with gymnasts is so, it's everywhere. And when coaches don't know what to do, basically the athlete either quits or, they'll get new athletes. But
I'm
it's
loving
Have you
where
happening.
the,
know? Sorry, Ben. I got one
oh,
final
go ahead.
follow up with this,
Yep.
but no, I'm curious. Do you notice a difference, Stacey, between working with athletes in individual sports versus team sports, and how they're affected with their thought processes there, and that pressure, that A circle type feelings that they're having?
Yes, I'm so glad you asked that question, because if I work with a hockey player, I had a kid at Shattuck here in Minnesota, and a couple of years ago, and he was not a big kid, right? So he had to be really good. And I was working with him, and I said, "What's going well for you?" And he said, I'm scoring more." And I said, "What strategy? What's working for you?" And he said, "Goal beyond the goal. I teach a strategy called goal beyond the goal." And I said, "How are you using it?" And he said, "I don't see the goalie anymore. I only see the net."
Hmm.
But when you have a guy who is mentally connected and his mind and body are on the same page, he's in the zone, however you want to call it. When you have one person on a team that's representing that, everybody's going to learn without him even saying anything. It's like if you've got, Patrick Mahomes, people learn from him, and you kind of only need one guy in the NFL to be mentally strong to be able to win a Super Bowl, you know?
Feed off of them.
But if
Yeah.
you've got a team, Twin City Twisters, my daughter was never, she competed level 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 9, 9, 10, 10, 10, 10. And she was never not on a winning state team her
Hmm.
entire career.
Wow.
And I was there for about 11 years before COVID. And it wasn't because of me, because they have an amazing program, but they were definitely mentally strong, and they knew how to go after the outcome they wanted. They knew how to maximize those opportunities. And at the end of the season, they did not choke.
Hmm. I was just going to say, I'm loving where this is going, and there's a lot of things flying through my head in terms of questions for you, Stacey. I guess front and center is like when you go, can you give us a short synopsis or kind of run through of when you meet with an athlete? Like, what are the kind of things, like, walk us through that process. And the thing that I really like about this, what you do so far, and what we're learning is these are things that, again, down the road, these can help these young boys and girls, men and women. But walk us through kind of a process. Let's say you come into a meeting, and let's use Mike as an example here. He was a player. Like, what are the kind of things you would ask them? What do you do when you meet with them?
Well, most of the time, I get athletes through their parents,
Okay.
right? Most of them are young. And I have a group on Facebook called Athletes Who Settle for More, and there's about 14,000 people on there, and I've seen
Yeah.
thousands of those people. But they'll come to me because they see the problem. My athlete is not confident. They tell me the symptom of the problem. They're lacking confidence. There's negative self-talk. They just are so upset about, put so much pressure on themselves. And so when I work with that athlete, the first thing that I do is I teach them the doing strategy, the learning strategy, and A circle. And that first session is about them, because every athlete is taught to just do it. Don't think about it.
Mhm.
And a lot of athletes in the NFL can get to the NFL, but just by doing it. But the problem with that is the doing strategy. If I don't know how to decide to choose to do it, if I'm not empowered about what strategy I want to use, then when it doesn't work, then what? So an NFL, rookie that comes into the NFL, if he is just doing it through college and he doesn't need anything else, it's kind of like it's kind of like everybody has an issue where the doing strategy doesn't work. I was in college. I, was pretty good in high school. I got pretty good grades, and then in college it didn't work. And I didn't get good grades, and I flunked out my third year. I'm like,
Huh.
oh my God, now what am I going to do? But I didn't know the learning strategy. I didn't know that I could use my mind to focus on what I needed to do one step at a time. I didn't know that I could think about what, you know, how to do it, right? I didn't know I could feel my way through, see my way through, talk my way through, think my way through, some kind of combination, or choose to just do it and kick my mind out. And so the
Do you find
doing,
a correlation? Sorry, real quick. I want to interrupt you real quick. Do you find a correlation? And I just thought about this as you're talking about like something always working until it doesn't, and then what do you do now, right? So you were talking about your daughter's gymnastics team having won however many championships for several years in a row. Do you find any sort of a correlation between athletes that have never lost and then when they do lose, how they can handle that? Is that similar to what you're talking about here?
Hmm.
yes, I had a soccer player, number one recruit for female soccer for college. Um, she's a freshman, so this past year. And she had a mentality that she knew how to play to win with a really supportive coach
Hmm.
and really supportive teammates. And then when she got to college, that wasn't the case. At least she didn't perceive it like that. And so she didn't know how to be successful because she had had that ability to be successful with that same situation and mentality. And so her mom called me and I worked with her again because she needed to understand how she could manage that situation and be her best, even without some of the things that she needed before. She just had to find a new way to focus on what she can do, regardless of what the coach was going to say or do.
Yeah, I think that's really important too. And I talk about that because Stacey, I coach youth hockey now as part of as a little bit of a side gig from my normal 9 to 5 job. And I talk to parents all the time. I have in the position at summer AAA here in Minnesota. I am oftentimes having to make cuts with kids each year, and having those conversations at 10, 11, and 12 years old is not a fun spot to be in. And I don't certainly enjoy that aspect. In fact, it's my least favorite. But what I always try to leave parents with, and I think it's important for kids, is knowing what it feels like to not make the team you want or to not have everything go your way, and how are you going to respond. And there's two ways to respond, right? You can respond in a positive way and work on figuring out the other path and what that looks like, or you get angry, you quit, you make excuses, you for lack of a better word, say some not choice words, I guess, about the coach behind his back and make it his problem. But yeah, I found that really interesting because that's something I feel like when you mentioned with your daughter, that resonated with me a little bit. I was never cut from a team until I got cut from the Colorado Avalanche my rookie year training camp in the NHL. That was the first time I'd truly been cut from a team. So I was curious about that because it definitely is something, if you're not used to it, or people that have had to work harder because they haven't always gotten their success right away, they've learned multiple tools in their tool belt to have success at a higher level when stuff doesn't go right.
Exactly. The doing strategy, the learning strategy. The learning strategy is basically how I learn and the modality I use. So I'm aware of that to do that when something doesn't just happen or I can't just do it. And so, people will say to me, athletes have to be visual. And I'm like, well, if my daughter called me from Ball State and she said, my coach told me, my mental skills coach here told me I have to visualize myself on the beam. But when I do, I see myself on the side of the beam.
Hmm.
And I'm like, yeah, don't do that. But the learning strategy helps people understand for them what modality works. Some people, when you think of when you were playing well, for instance, how are you doing it? Were you feeling your way through the game, seeing your way through, talking your way through, thinking your way through, some kind of combination, or none of them? Right? So when you understand the modality that you use to mentally connect to your body, then when somebody says something to you, you're like, okay, but I need to focus on feeling the ice, feeling, the stick, feeling, seeing Wayne Gretzky was perfect at seeing the 10 steps in front of him, right? So just understanding what modality works best for you, then it gives you a new place to land when the doing strategy doesn't work. If people don't have that, I had my son look up, I think the average NFL player is in the NFL for 3 years.
Not
I
long.
know why. Because they get there on the doing strategy, and when it doesn't work, they can't survive. They can't mentally manage it, and they quit or they get fired.
So, Stacey, I want to ask you in terms of the amount in the different sports that you work in. I've heard you mention 3 so far and kind of a two-parter. How many other sports have you worked in, and where would you like to go to another level with what you're doing?
That's a great question. I have been blessed to work with athletes all over the world. I have currently I have a snowboarder who's a professional snowboarder, female,
Wow.
and she was at the X Games, and then she wants to be in the Olympics, and she also does my TikTok videos for me. So she listens to my videos and then cuts them up and puts them on TikTok for me. So she
Okay.
gets like a little extra coaching going on there. But I worked with, I mean, anything you can imagine, car racing, horse,
Hmm.
the rodeo, kids who do,
Really?
yeah, like that.
Wow.
They gotta get on, on a horse, and then they gotta, what do you call it? The goat, they rope the
Roping.
and
Yeah.
then
Calf.
jump off the
Yeah.
horse, and she kept falling coming off the horse, so we worked on that. It really anything you can imagine, but primarily a lot of gymnasts, a lot of skaters, a lot of baseball,
Mhm.
the traditional twisties and the yips and the things like that, a lot of golf,
Hmm.
and really from professional on down. What I'd like to do is now take it from the top down, take it, from the top of an organization down into the community, really getting people to be able to be empowered with managing their A circle, knowing how to take care of themselves, how to show up for themselves in their own A circle, and maximize those opportunities that athletes have, but really anybody in life with um, any opportunity that they have.
Do you
So,
find
question.
what? Sorry, Carmi, real quick.
I
So do
was gonna
you?
say, go ahead.
No, I'm curious. Like bull riders, golfers, skating. That was like skating and gymnastics to me. I might be going a little off topic here, but they're very similar in the sense, and I suppose golf is too, but at the end of the day, golf's not because you get the lowest score and you win. But in gymnastics and skating, they're judged. And that's got to be an incredible challenge for an athlete to go through that because you could literally go out there and say, I just had the best performance I've ever had, but you may not win. So what do you do in those kind of situations as a coach doing what you do? How do you coach them up to get them back on the horse, so to speak?
Well, that's a great question because you guys talk a lot in transitions.
Yep.
I just was talking to a level 10 gymnast is um, level 10 feeds the division 1, 2, and 3 program for college.
Okay.
And I have she's already recruited, and she's recruited for her vault. And she was having trouble with her vault. Well, I wonder why, right? She's got pressure in her A circle about her vault that she has to do in college next year. And they're all watching her, things like that. And so the first of all, knowing A circle and what's in there and what's causing those issues for her is crucial for her to be aware of, because then she can manage it. And then strategies to use to help her focus. Today we talked about she gets ahead of herself mentally. And so she does one skill, but she's not thinking about that one as she's doing it. So then she gets ahead of herself, and then it messes her up. So using a strategy and a tool to help her understand what to do instead of just saying, oh, get out of your head. It's okay. What's in your A circle? Oh, I'm thinking on my front tuck when I'm doing my layout, my twist, and then I'm twisting off the table. Okay. Right. So getting her to understand, how do you want to come off the table so you can twist the way getting her to be able to connect the dots so she can understand what to do. And then she practices it that way. and that solves the problem.
Hmm.
Well, that made me think of another question. So I've got two for you. But in terms of that, so it sounds like a lot of how you're coaching is in routines, right? It's mental preparation for what you're doing and keeping a specific routine so you can always reset to that routine. And in the same way that I think a lot of athletes have a set warm up that they do. But that kind of leads into my second part here. You've been doing this for 16 years. Is that my count? You said 11 prior to COVID and then five, so 4 or 5 cents. Um, it's obviously the mental side of the game has become so much more important now, and so many more athletes are taking advantage of that. So when you started versus now,
Mhm.
other than the number of athletes taking part in it, what's some of the trends or changes maybe you've noticed, and how people approach what you're doing?
Well, when I work with a lot of, let's take just the boys' sports, basketball, football, hockey. They are coached by their dads, and baseball too. And then, teachers and things like that until they get into like maybe an AAU program or something like that. And the problem is when before the age of 10, we don't have our own filter. We cannot distinguish what's said to us from what's true about us from the people we trust. And so if I've got my dad coaching me at 8 years old and he says something to me, how I perceive it is going to run my life. And if he says something, if he yells at me or whatever, it's going to affect me in a way that back when I was an athlete, we didn't have that. We didn't have people who were training us 20 hours a week like my daughter did for when I was 8. And so I didn't get all of these maybe negative things, or I didn't perceive things as negative like the kids do now. That's why they're burning out at 12 and 13 years old, because they mentally cannot manage those things that are in their A circle, and then they get built up and piggybacked on over time to the degree that they can't. They just struggle mentally and they quit.
So it's almost like the pressures are starting earlier, is what
Yep.
you've noticed now.
And because the kids are so young, again, they don't have their own ability to separate what's true about them from what people are saying to them. And we all can relate to that. We all have had somebody, say something to us when we were 10 years old, that still is how we behave. We still have those people in our A circle.
Hmm.
And it's just so in that regard, I see a lot of people needing to be able to manage their A circle so that they can kick these things out and not be affected by them over time. That's where the mental health issues come up versus just being mentally strong. If we're mentally strong, the mental health issues won't be a problem, because we'll understand how to manage ourselves, take care of ourselves, instead of those people affecting us in such a negative way that we can't separate what they say, all the eating disorders and all the different abuse things and all the things that we've got going on more on the female sports, in my opinion, than the male sports, because of, a coach says something. If I have my coach in my A circle and he tells me I'm fat, well, how am I going to perceive that as a young girl? If I have my A circle and I understand, oh, wow, he's crabby today, bummer for him, I'm going to go eat my piece of bread, And so there's different, but I believe if we understand and our kids understand A circle, then as a coach, what you say to them is not going to affect them personally or in an unhealthy way, because they'll be able to manage it. Like, I don't know what you mean by that, or, kick you out, or, okay, I understand what he's trying to tell me, but I need to figure out how to do that. Then they have some space between them and their thoughts that gives them the ability to manage things better.
Hmm. Among the many things that Stacey does, Carmi, I wanted to show this book. This is the book that
I saw that. I Googled it. I saw it.
yeah, you wrote and really stemmed from your daughter. And then is this one here? It's titled Mental Strength Coaching Journal for Athletes. So Stacey, is this like homework for some of your clients? Like, do they have to go in and is this part of the process that they have to do and fill this out?
The books, the first book I wrote was the Mental Strength Coaching Journal for Athletes, book 1. And
Yep.
so that's the doing strategy, learning strategy, A circle, and goal beyond the goal.
Mm-hmm.
It also has an intentional word of the day. And the book is really set up for people to be able to read and, process the strategies from a different modality other than me teaching them.
Okay.
So they can, a lot of athletes will use it the way it is. But really what I find helpful for the books is that parents, they may not be in session with me and their athlete all the time, but they can read the book and understand what I'm doing. And they can get a lot out of it for themselves. And like you guys both mentioned, this is not just for an athlete, but as a parent, they can understand, I think I'm in my child's A circle and I don't think it's helpful. And parents do not want to be in their kids' A circle if it's not helpful.
Yeah.
But when they have the language and the ability to speak about it and ask their athlete, then that makes a better situation for the athlete. Mom,
So,
you're in my A circle and I don't want you there. Don't say that or whatever. I just need to vent. You don't need to jump in my A circle and fix it. I'm fine. I just need to vent. Right? You have more conversations then with your parents on what's going on versus everybody freaking out when something goes wrong.
yeah, real quick, Carmi, that makes me think of something. I'm curious with the circles. So I helped coach my son for 10 years when I could, when I was here. And I have a story from a practice one day. And what the head coach said, hey, Benny, go over and work in this side of the ice with these guys. Send them over here when you're done. So Carmi will appreciate this. My son was 6 or 7, maybe 8. And he thought at that time it was cool to fall down. Like he thought it was cool to fall down on the ice. And so I skated over calmly, and I always tried to have that relationship with my son that I understood what he was doing. I understood what he went through because I didn't play nearly as long as Carmi. I was a high school guy, and that was it. But the point is, I got down on one knee and I said, Luke, you got to quit falling down. You got to stay on your feet. You can't play the game if you're not on your feet. And he looked up at me and he goes, you're really frustrating me right now, Dad. And I said, I'm going to go over to this side and work with these kids. So where does that fit in all these circles?
Well, he kicked you out.
He kicked me out. He kicked me out of all of them.
It's pretty self-explanatory, Benny. You got kicked out of the A circle. Didn't need your energy.
You were never in the C circle, Ben. You were like, in the Z circle.
Yeah.
I mean, he didn't. The interesting thing about that, he didn't actually kick you out because you were in his A circle enough to frustrate him.
Okay.
Right?
Understood.
So he respects the fact that you're whatever that is for him, but he was also able to go to at least voice it for you, and that's helpful because then you could go, oh, okay, I'll just go over here. You didn't pile it on and say, no, stay on your feet.
I was very humbled in that moment. That's one of the most humbling moments I had of all the years I coached and helped coach my son. It was like, okay.
And if you teach them A circle, then you can have a conversation to them. When they do something wrong, you'd say, what was in your A circle? Well, I was worried that you were going to yell at me. Oh,
yeah,
that's valid. But you see how then that was controlling you? Are you okay with that? No. What could you do? I could just focus on how I want to move my body to move the puck, whatever. So A circle provides the ability for then people to manage the situation because of course you're going to be in his A circle. You're his dad and his coach. It's kind of a double whammy. But you're right. We don't want to mess up our kids. We're all doing that without coaching. But for them, now I just say, well, Livy, she called me. She goes, Mom, my coaches and my teammates need me to be first on beam, to set the tone, to be consistent and confident. And I said, well, Liv, if you are okay with having your coaches and your teammates in your A circle, I'm okay with it. She's like, oh, annoyed with me. But I said, you can be in your A circle by yourself and be confident and consistent.
It's, as a little bit of I want to say this ace circling for one other point. We've had a lot of athletes come on and tell us, we kind of will ask them, like what's your advice or what do you have for guys coming out of the game or maybe thinking of coming out of the game? And a very consistent answer we've got is being open to everything, talking to everybody, using like networking while you're still playing, like taking advantage of meeting with people. But you talk about a circle and it's putting the right people around you to prop you up and have you be able to succeed, not be around, or be able to recognize when you're around someone like, hey, I don't need this person to be directly influencing anything I do, as I'm trying to make my next life choice to, move on from professional sports. So I feel like that's very unique tie-in for that.
That is such a great point, because having the ability to decide how you want to work with what you're doing is key. That's everything, because then you're not necessarily doing things for the wrong reasons. Then you're not being persuaded by something that doesn't, somebody that doesn't really have your best interest at heart or whatever that is. But you're right, the transition between going from a sport to something else is so important for people to understand that they have what they need and they have the resources from the sport. And that's what's not taught in normal, sports. Most athletes, when they leave, the sport kind of takes the resources with it mentally or unconsciously. And then the person's left like whatever, starting over or not really having those things that they got out of the sport. So the strategies and the tools, if we're not teaching people how to be successful and how to practice it and duplicate it, how can they take the success from the sport and move it forward? And that's what's not happening. That's why I get frustrated. The Vikings do great right now, but I'm a little worried when they go to that first playoff game. Because if they don't understand how they're doing things and how they're winning, how they're confident, how they're doing what they're doing, how are they going to do it when somebody gets really difficult? Right?
Well, that's interesting. You put it that way because
Yeah.
so often we talk about, or it's a common thing within the sports world. What you're going to learn in sports is going to benefit you later in life, right? It's going to teach you skill sets and mindsets that are going to only help you down the road the rest of your life, even when you're out of sports. But there's a gap there. There is a gap from translating what I'm learning in hockey or gymnastics or bull riding, any of rodeo, any of that stuff. There's a skill set or a mindset you might have for that. You don't know how to translate it to, the everyday world or your next career or different career path, whatever it is. So I think that's where the gap exists, and you just pointed that out very clearly.
And they're like, otherwise Michael Jordan would have been a great coach. They're not.
Yeah.
Great players are not great coaches. Why? It's because they do not understand what they were doing unconsciously well to be able to, for themselves, understand it, first of all, but then to help other people do that for themselves. And that is so exciting that we can do that. That's what I want. That's what I'm doing now, from top down. How do we get these guys to understand, the rookies getting ready for the NFL faster, preventing injury, getting the guys back from injury faster, because it's all mental from there, and then winning the big game. Those are the biggest things that I see people losing money and, as an organization. But those are the things where we have gaps, like what you were saying, Mike, is that those are the places where we need mental understanding. We need to understand how to perceive the things that are happening to us in a way that we can work with them, and shift in success, shift in belief, shift in potential. Those are the 5 shifts in my company that I'm working with people on.
And you
Stacey,
could
I'm
add,
going to have you come on as my golf coach.
Yeah.
I might need that too. I may hire you.
Goal beyond the goal.
I would add Magic Johnson and Wayne Gretzky to the list of people like Michael Jordan.
Yeah.
Neither one of them were great coaches because of what you just talked about. I want to ask you about Maggie Nichols, Stacey, and that's an area that Mike and I talked about, and we watched another episode of another show you had done, and we don't want to get into all the things that happened necessarily with Larry Nasser and all that. Everyone knows that name for all the wrong reasons, for what he horribly did to so many innocent young kids in the sport of gymnastics. But tell us why Maggie Nichols is special, and what's unique about her and what you love so much about her.
Well, Maggie was at my daughter's gym. My daughter's 4 years younger than Maggie. And Maggie was in ninth grade when I started at Twin City Twisters, and I was there about every other week. And I did their mental strength coaching. And when she was at camp and at the elite with the elite program, when that happened, what I was so proud of and what keeps me really focused is her ability to manage her A circle and her ability to stay in her A circle when that happened and communicate it to her teammate, and her coach, thank God, overheard.
Yeah.
Because they weren't afraid of the consequence of voicing their opinion. She lost her Olympic spot because of her desire to say, no, this is not going to happen. And so I'm really proud of the fact that she managed herself through that situation. And if you watch Athlete A, those women who came out of that situation were not victims of him. They were better because of their situation and the way they took it and worked with, obviously they were victims. I don't mean that, but they came out of that situation healthy, and they were not going to allow him to be in their, to take their power away moving forward. And Maggie was amazing at that. And when she went to Oklahoma, she kicked it into gear, and she was the #1 NCAA gymnast. I'm sure that every year that she was there.
Wow. Good for her.
Just, yeah.
That's incredible. I mean, you talk about,
Yeah, it is.
Obviously a truly disgusting occurrence in the sport of gymnastics there. But to be able to rebound from that, losing your, standing up for yourself and your teammates, but losing your Olympic spot over that, something you've worked for since, especially in gymnastics at a very, very young age for a long time. But to be able to pivot and then go have success in a different way, that's an incredible story to hear. And, I think a lot of listeners or viewers have probably seen Athlete A. I know I have. And, you don't necessarily hear about the other side of it in terms of people that maybe were aware of it and, but it started the beginning of the end for that guy. And so that's really cool to hear the success on the other side of it for some of the athletes.
It really is.
Yeah, and my daughter was in the documentary, so it was she's at the airport. But Maggie is really a special person, and takes a lot of courage and takes a lot of strength just to be able to do what she did within that situation.
What was she like when you started to work with her? Did you really have to work on the mental side, or was she one of those athletes and a young woman, young girl at that time in ninth grade that came to you when she was mentally strong, or what was it like working with her when you first got her?
She was definitely mentally strong. She
Mm.
was a level 10-year-old, and her first nationals, she was the youngest athlete at nationals.
Wow.
For level 10. Maggie had some patterns of injury that were a problem for her mentally, but also a resource for her. People that have patterns of injury, they come back stronger, right? There's this, they get injured and then they come back stronger, and we have to be careful about that, because then the injuries get typically worse, and they happen in times that we don't really have the energy and the time for it anymore. But so she had some patterns of injury that I worked with her on, but she also needed those injuries to come back and to be, successful at the end of the day. And so she definitely was an athlete who, especially back then, when I was pretty new at the team environment, but also the elite athletes back then were the coach luckily was my daughter's coach as well as the elite coach when my daughter was really young, but very, very hard and very difficult, like very, very controlling. And so there's been a huge amount of growing pains from when I first started there to now because of Larry Nasser and the whole shift of what, how people treat these athletes. But there's a long way to go. And so, giving these people the tools and strategies they need to be able to manage that is so important to me because of that reason. They're so young.
Are you finding that
Right.
not just in gymnastics, but other sports that are you being reached out to by teams and programs to come in and like, hey, we want you to work with, at least do a session with each one of our players as a baseline and see if if you guys can both benefit from it. Is there any of that going on, or is it parents specifically reaching out to you about their individual child?
Well, primarily parents contact me through referrals of other people. I haven't put $1 into marketing my business in about 6 years.
That's good business.
Great
Yeah.
business.
Yeah, I'm very grateful.
That's great.
People will just tell their friends who their daughter is seeing or what's happening. And it's interesting, like I worked with this family, they had a female volleyball player. And I was working with her, I think as like a junior, senior, she was getting recruited for college. And then a couple of years later, they called me about their son. And they said he's 17 and he's either going to go to Mississippi State or he's going to go into the MLB. And he had a really bad outing on a Wednesday. And his agent said, if you play like that again, you're never going to play in the MLB. And they called me. And so I saw him that like Wednesday night. I saw him again on Thursday night. He had another outing on Friday. And the agent called me on Saturday and said, what happened? And I said, what do you mean? He said, I've never seen him play so well.
Wow.
And he flipped because he had that agent in his A circle, obviously. And he's got like 30 scouts on the fence watching him every game in the last year. But I taught him the learning strategy in A circle. And then he was able to manage himself and stay in it. And he did get drafted. And he was like in the 37th, second round and the 37th pick or something for the Pittsburgh Pirates or whatever. So he's in that process now, and his parents kind of let me know how things are going. But you would think that the agent would call me more, but he hasn't. I'm waiting for those calls from him. But
Credit where credit's due.
No kidding.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I think it's a fluke though, but it's not.
I gotta ask, is the painting behind you, is that reflective of the circles? Is that the symbolism of that, or is that completely coincidence?
Somebody, my son's ex-girlfriend painted that for Christmas for me a couple years ago, and I love it. So
yeah, it's great.
It's a circle, and so I thought I'd put it behind me because why not?
Yeah,
absolutely.
Well, as we come down the stretch here, Stacey, and this has been great. I mean, this is incredibly helpful. Again, I feel like this is good for all humans, like this kind of thinking and this mindset. And I did a basketball game today, a pro game, and one of the things that the analyst kept talking about was mindset, mindset, mindset. Like that's synchronicity because we obviously had this podcast, although we couldn't agree on what time it started. Somebody jumped the gun, but I kid, of course. But like, I guess my last question for you here is, how would somebody that maybe is making a move, let's say like our podcast, when the game ends, the transition out for an athlete, how do they take your principles and help their transition? How would they go about that? What would be the couple steps that would be front and center?
Well, goal beyond the goal is extremely valuable,
Okay.
whether you're in a sport or not in a sport.
Yep.
And because goal beyond the goal my daughter was recruited as a sophomore, and or, back then they recruited that early. But when she was a senior, she had an L5 fracture in her back.
Mm.
The day before the signing, her senior year, Ball State called me and said, we're going to take back the scholarship.
Ah,
And they said, when she gets her skills back, we'll give it back to her. And I was upset, me as a mom, because I'm like, now she's a senior. What am I going to do? You can't
Yeah.
just like get another scholarship from somewhere. And I said to my daughter, I said, Liv, how do you feel about that? And she goes, well, of course I'm going to get my skills back. I'm competing in college. So her goal beyond the goal was to make the lineup. So it never affected her in a negative. I'm sure she thought about it, but her goal beyond the goal was already to the next level. So those bumps in the road and those things that happened did not affect her, and it didn't take her out of her body. It didn't discourage her. It was annoying because she couldn't sign with her friends or whatever, but she was like, well, of course I'm going to get my skills back. I'm competing in college. And they didn't give it back to her until April. But she was never, it was always about, and she made the lineup. She competed all around as a freshman at Ball State. And she's 5'7". She's not your typical huge talent gymnast, but obviously she is, but she was mentally able to manage that. And goal beyond the goal, if there's a circle and goal beyond the goal, people can take those and use them and work with them. That's if you have a hockey player and you're not going to play after college, well, goal beyond the goal is extremely valuable, not only to leave a legacy of being a leader or what they want to use, with the sport, but then you can say, okay, how do you want to use this beyond the sport? What do you want to do? It helps them transition so they don't get disconnected before the end of the season. So they're not worried about things that kick them out of their body, so they can, maximize the opportunities through the end and then go from there and use those strategies and those tools beyond that.
Yeah, that's a perfect answer. I mean,
Yeah.
talk about translatable skills and separating the people that are not going to be good influences around you in your life, and also knowing with what you're shooting for, what you're doing, what's beyond that, and being prepared for that. That really ties into what we're trying to bring out in every interview we do. So that nailed it perfectly.
And have your little hockey kids have a goal beyond the goal beyond the goal. After I shoot, then I'm going to go get the puck back. After I shoot, they need a goal beyond the goal to allow them to shoot the way they need to connected, so they don't get disconnected because they're worried about not making the shot.
Yep. I'm definitely stealing that. I think I've tried to say that, but now I have some more logic behind it, and I have a little bit more of a coherent speech prepared by you. So thank you.
Nice.
Yes. Awesome.
That's great. Well, Stacey, this was awesome. Give you a shout out for your books one more time for those watching. If you're listening to the podcast, Mental Strength Coaching Journal for Athletes, and then the book here, Mentally Strong Gymnast. And go ahead and tell people how they can follow you. Your website, we'll give you an opportunity to plug that before we put a bow on this.
The easiest thing to do is, if you're on Facebook, is to join my group, Athletes Who Settle for More.
Yeah.
That's where I go live. I do a lot of stuff on there all the time. And on Instagram, so connected _ my website is so connected. It's soconnected.mykajabi.com. So it's not as easy, but then they can email me at stacey@so-connected.com.
Very nice. Thanks so much for your time. I'm glad for a pair of Minnesotans. That's what you're called in Minnesota, right? Minnesotans. The Vikings won as we tape this an hour early, by the way. That's because of me. So thanks for
Correct.
both of you for
Correct. I didn't get to watch the fourth quarter of the game because Ben jumped the gun, just so everybody knows. Set the
talking
record
heads,
straight.
man. Talking heads. That's why I need a producer.
That's why you're the professional, though, because you were dialed in an hour ahead of time.
Yeah. And I was ready. I was like, oh, sure, we can start. That would be great.
Stacey,
Okay.
this was tremendous. Thank you so much, and we really appreciate your time and great insight, and I think this will help anybody out there, no matter what they do in life. Thanks so much for your time. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks again. Bye-bye.
All right, that'll take care of episode number 12. Stacey Goodrich, our guest. For Mike Carmen, Ben Holden saying, thanks for watching When the Game Ends. This has been episode 12. We'll see you next time with an all-new edition.